Hello, everyone. Ambassador Terry here with my co-host and superstar author, groundbreaking book, Visual Leadership, Todd Cherches. Todd, I'm excited about this. There we go. There we go. And, and I'm excited about what we're kind of talking about today. It's what is this issues with? We're still dealing with work from home, return to office. Do you have to? Do you have to do it 3 days a week? All those kinds of things. Well, we're also going to talk about something that has recently come up called office mixing. Write that down, ladies and gentlemen. Office mixing. And what is that? What does that mean? Well, it means, staffing part of the office working from home and or returning some back to the office, or some mixing around, people being able to work 3 days either side of that equation with their co-partner or cohort at the office. So there are days of the week where there are no daycare or anything like that. That can be worked out. That's a home day. So, it's working with, we have a brand new generation of workers since COVID even that's really hitting the workforce. What are you thinking about that? What comes up to you with the office mixing like we talked about the other day?
Yeah, there's so many issues. All the rules have changed. There used to be a concept called MBWA, managing by walking around, right? As a manager, you would get out from your desk, your corner office, and walk around and say, how's your day going? You do that now, no one's at their desk, right? So it's like you can't do that if people are home or if people are at the Starbucks or whatever. So managing and leading has become more challenging. Younger people, I teach at NYU and Columbia, people new to the workforce. I'm teaching a class right now, an internship class at NYU, where students are doing an internship, but also taking this class at the same time. And my job is to help them integrate what they're learning in school and apply it to the workplace and vice versa. So everything's new. A lot of these students came of age during the pandemic, so they've missed out on the socialization process, both in school or in internships or working. Because if they work from home, in fact, my friend's daughter has had 3 or 4 jobs, and she's never worked in an office. So first she was working from her parents' house in her bedroom, and then she has an apartment with roommates or whatever. But she's never met a coworker. She's never had a boss stop by her desk because she's at home, right? So how does that work? How do you learn? Where's that apprenticeship model of learning sitting at the side of your boss and watching what they do, or turning to a peer, as I did, and say, hey, am I crazy? Or did you hear something? Or how do you do this? How do you do that? So there's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of isolation. So these are just some of the topics. A lot of it depends on where you are in your career, or what point in your career you're at. Some people like to work at home. Some people can't wait to get back to the office. Some people don't like to be ordered to come back to the office. They're fine doing it on their own schedule because they may have to deal with child care issues, parent care issues, pets, right? So there's all kinds of issues. So I think the biggest thing is that there's no one size fits all answer or solution to any of these things, right? So I'll just leave it there. But those are some of the topics that have bubbled up to the surface when we talk about hot topics in the workplace right now.
Yeah, and some of my discussions with chief executives and stuff has their frustration about, look, I've got 20,000 square foot of office space out there and nobody in it.
Yeah.
And it drives me crazy to walk in and not see the place full. And yet in the back of my mind, everything's running fine. In fact, we're making money. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't make my ability mentally to connect with that. Okay. Us old guys, one of them, there was no such thing. There wasn't cell phones or anything when I first started my office gigs. And when I was leaving it, there was basic cell phones, but no iPhone possibilities. Mm-hmm. So, and that was like 15 years ago. I left that scenario, and there was no return to office. There was office,
right?
And there was some play in the 90s, late last century. I love saying that. I just love it. About the government, a lot of government, Department of Interior especially, they got a lot of biologists and they run around a lot anyway. So they started a program where, they would get them really nice HP laptops, and they could work remotely. So a lot of times, a couple of days a week, they were at home. There was a couple of days a week they're out of pocket somewhere, and it was no big deal. There were times when my ex-wife worked for the Department of Interior for a while, and there was times where there was no one in the office for days because they were remote all over the place.
Yeah.
But it was normal to think about that.
Right.
And they made better employees because they were able to stay connected with each other a lot better. And they did a whole lot fewer meetings. There was a time when my ex would tell me, we're going to have a meeting about having a meeting next month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's just a little weird. You're going to have a meeting to plan for having a meeting so that you can have the meeting the following month.
Yeah.
That's just a little bit crazy, but that was the kind of thing that happened in those days.
Yeah.
Now everybody jumps on a quick Zoom call or an intra-office meeting, and boom, 5 minutes later, everything was all taken care of. They didn't bring in people from 30 miles away and those kinds of things, which I saw what that could be. Now today, it is nothing to do a meetup or Zoom or a lot of different things, WhatsApp and such.
Yeah, Teams, Slack. There's just so many different platforms that people are using right now. WebEx, Google Meet, right? So,
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Psychologically, you and I are connected. Physically, we are not connected, and our bodies get used to that. Right now, like you were talking about, entering the new people were entering the workforce. This is all they've ever known. Mm-hmm. So this is nothing, right? And well, for you, for instance, you do some online teaching and you do in-person teaching. So your students, your MBAers, they have both worlds readily available to them. And, as far as like work from home, there's a whole lot of people out there that work better working from home than they do with all the interruptions of the office. They get more done more efficiently with a lot fewer errors. And then there's the people on the opposite side of that. They can't stand working at home. They need that physical interaction with people to really drive their juices. Yeah. So why not? And that's what we're doing here today. We're talking a little bit about everything. Why don't we mix up the office, chief executives? Why don't we go out there and find some people who love working from home, who like to come into the office 1 or 2 days a week? And let's go find some people that are not going to work remotely unless you make them. And let's make that gel work so that we're making money. The stockholders and the stakeholders love for us to make money. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing is there's no one size fits all solution to anything. So it makes it a little more complicated to manage and to lead. But that's, if you it's about, if you want to just, like in New York, a lot of companies are justifying bringing people back to the office or ordering them back because to justify their leases, right? We have all these desks, right? We have all this space that's just going to waste. That's not the best reason to have people come back to the office. One of my coaching clients had to commute 2 hours each way from Long Island to the office just to sit in their cubicle and be on Zoom all day, right? You just wasted 4 hours. He missed his daughter's ballet recital or his son's softball game or whatever because he had to be on the train commuting back and forth for no reason, right? If there is a reason, that's fine. So it depends on the industry, the company, your role, your function. Some jobs, you rely on those water cooler conversations and those collisions and those throwing people in a room together. I just facilitated a 2-day leadership offsite for a client. I'm based in New York. They are based in San Francisco or Silicon Valley. And last minute, we had to switch it from in-person to online. So one, I didn't have to go out there, which was great. It made it easier on me. 2, there's always the question of, will it be as effective online as it would have been in person? Now, in this case, everyone in this session, there were 12 director VP level people. They knew each other already. They had relationships, right? So it was totally fine. For a session where people don't know each other, it's not as effective from my personal experience, right? Because part of it is creating that psychological safety and that bonding and the getting to know each other. If you already have that established, doing it online, I wouldn't say it was 100% as effective, but it was 90% as effective, and it was really productive, and it was great. I've done the same thing where it wasn't as effective, where people didn't connect, people didn't talk, even if you put them in breakout rooms. It was like pulling teeth to get people to turn their cameras and their mics on. So that's not as effective. So again, there's no one size fits all saying this will always work in every situation, right? Similar to office mixing is hot desking, right? Where you don't have a desk. One of my clients just created a new condensed office space. It's beautiful, but everyone has a cubby hole or a locker, and they come in and they have to go on an app and book a desk for that day, right? So you have a map, and it's almost like booking your seat on an airline, right? You look and see what's available, you pick a desk, and that's your desk for the day, which is different from coming in, having a desk with your family pictures on it and your plants and your little memorabilia, right? Then you had a home at the office. This is the opposite of that. You literally have your laptop, maybe you have one picture of your family that you keep in there and you put out on your desk just to make you, feel at home. But that's a different mentality. It's a different way of working. So again, things are different, not good or better or worse, but just different. And it's about how do you adapt to that? How do you leverage that, right, in today's new realities?
Yeah, and I have something to follow that up with, and that is, reworking the revenue stream, rent out some of that office space so that people are coming in and out like hot desking, where they have the hookups, they can bring their own stuff in, and they have office space to conduct training. A company has a space to come in and do training or something like that, and it's cutting down that expense line. It's not always about, oh my God, the expense of unused items. Well, let's use them. Mm-hmm. Hot desking is an excellent way to do that. And renting the place out to somebody else, you're not going to have your computer set up there for them to sit down and hack or anything like that. Let's get wise about what we can do with it that creates revenue, instead of worrying about how the EBIT is going to look. Well, the EBIT is going to look pretty good if you come up with some really cool ways of bringing in more revenue streams, mm-hmm. Yeah. Right? What have you heard about that? You've got some new MBAs that just entered the world. What are they thinking?
Yeah, I mean, they're just trying to figure it out. They're trying to figure out the social norms, creating a culture within organizations, not knowing what the culture is or what it's like. In a lot of cases, the culture of a workplace has a lot to do with the physical environment, the space, right? What it looks like, what it feels like. Some of my clients have different theme names on their meeting rooms, or whatever. If you're not in the office, you don't know. That's not part of the culture. How do you ingrain that culture? One of the things that one of my couple clients did, one was they sent everyone the stretchy bracelets that you put on. So when they're working, they should wear the bracelet, and when they're not working, they should take it off. So keep it on their desk. Just psychologically, it created the cultural thing. Some people felt like it was handcuffs, so they didn't love that idea. It felt like psychologically they were handcuffed to their desk. But the idea behind it, another company during the pandemic sent all their clients slippers, company-themed slippers. So when you're working at home, you put on your slippers. But I think part of it is just that psychological, when you're working from home, sometimes working from the office, there's no off switch, right? There's no barriers. There's no boundaries, right? You could feel like when you're working from home, you can feel like you're working 24 hours a day. You get an idea while you're watching TV at 10 p.m. at night, where you forget you sent that email, you jump onto your computer, and then you end up working for 2 or 3 hours, right? It's not mentally healthy. There's no separation. So part of what those companies are doing is trying to find some way to remind people of when they're working and when they're not working, so they can separate it. And some of those are just symbolic visual trinkets or whatever that you could put out on your desk. It's kind of like the office is open or the office is closed. But I think that, little suggestions like that go a long way to reminding people when they're at work and when they're not, and helping people. Because burnout is a key theme right now. Because if you never have an off switch, if you feel like you're always working, you're always on call, especially in today's world where everything's global, everything is connected. Like I was just saying before, tonight I'm teaching a workshop at 11 p.m. for one of my clients for their Asia office, right? So I'm going to be doing that from 11 till 12:30. So you just have to account for that. Like you said, if he needs to take a nap, right? But you can't penalize people for being asleep during the workday if you're going to ask them to work all kinds of crazy hours. One of my coaching clients, he manages one group in Europe and one group in Asia. If he doesn't turn it off, then he has no mental break. He has no time off. He has no weekends or vacation because work is always open somewhere, right? So we need to build that in to the workflow and to policies and empower people to make the decisions that will help them to work best, right? You can't impose like strict rules on everyone because they may or may not apply in every situation. So those are, again, complexities that leaders need to focus on and think about to have a more engaged and productive workforce.
Yeah. I have on my Google Calendar, name drop, on my Google Calendar, busy or free. There's times where I block out a nap, or I'll block out a day. I don't want anybody bothering me. Like normally my Tuesdays or 2-minute Tuesdays start early in the morning, and I do a lot of things all day long. I don't want to add in appointments, so I'll block out. Yeah. And so my clients, for the most part, they're starting to do the same thing because they, part of working with me is expanding globally. And so there's a lot of time issues to, like you're talking about, that you get to work with. And sometimes that's blocking out 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. Because you've got to be off the net to get yourself reconnected to the next hours of work, whether that's play or work or whatever. And for the most part, they're reporting back to me it works pretty good. For me, it works outstanding.
Yeah. I block out Monday mornings until noon and Friday afternoons afternoon. So I don't schedule anything for those 2 blocks. If occasionally, like this Friday, I have a coaching session at 2 p.m., but that's an exception. I have that reserved if I need to for emergency situations. But in general, I like that I like to bookend my week, right? So ramp up on that Monday morning because you never know what's going to happen on a Monday morning, right? So companies that say, we schedule an 8 a.m. meeting every Monday just to start off the week. Again, that's a decision to be made. I don't recommend it. I think giving people that time to ramp up and that time at the end of the week to wind down and plan for the following week is a healthier way. Again, if you need to that half hour somewhere, you have it and you could use it. But because otherwise, if you just fill your calendar up with wall-to-wall meetings, when do you get your actual work done, right? So we need to build that in and block out time for yourself, even if it's going to the gym or just thinking time. So many people rush from meeting to meeting. And even with meetings, I try to advocate for 45-minute meetings. Not every meeting needs to be an hour. So you can block out the hour, but you leave that last 15 minutes for, just action items, checking your email. Because when you do back-to-back meetings with no space in between, by the time you're done with that 5th straight meeting, you can't even remember what happened in the first 2, right? So if you have action items and everything else. So just make that part of your culture. Just put the hour on the calendar, but say at 45 minutes too, let's talk. I always talk about insights, actions, and outcomes, right? What did we take from it? What are we going to do with it? And what results are we trying to achieve, right? And also who's doing what by when. Just like in a football game, at the end of a huddle, everyone knows what their role is. And every meeting with who is doing what by when, and then you go off on your separate ways until the next time. So if you don't do that, you're going to lose a lot of productivity. It causes confusion, and it's just not really, you want to be both efficient and effective. And when you don't do that, it really impacts the efficiency and effectiveness of all these meetings and the workflow and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I got that training very early on when I was a young man in the Navy. One of my bosses that I still love and miss dearly, he was a big proponent about do nothing, plan nothing for the first 2 hours of the Monday morning so that we all get in the office, we get acclimated to working again and connect with each other. And once we have synergized, he loved that. Once we have synergized, we'll take on the world. Yeah. But first we take on each other. we get comfortable, we get our coffee, we do what we're going to do, check emails, and then if we need a meeting, we do it. If we don't, we don't.
Right.
There's no planned morning on Mondays.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, plan on goofing off on Friday afternoon for the most part, because you're going to anyway. You've got plans for the weekend or whatever. You're not fully engaged unless there is a specific reason, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And I love that. Yeah. I love that. We
want to ramp up and wind down, right? You want to kind of almost like a roller coaster, right?
Yeah. So what happened all weekend that requires immediate action, maybe not so immediate action, or just connecting with a quick phone call with somebody, and then you shut all of that off. The weekend's gone, now let's go. Mm-hmm. You know, I found that I work much better that way to this day, 50 years later. Wow, 50. But yeah, you know.
Well, that's another thing too. To help people find out and do the work in the way that works best for you, right? I'm a night person. My peak hours of creativity are between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m., right? That's when I do my best thinking, my best writing, my best designing. I wrote my book during those hours. That's when I function. If you ask me to think or innovate or come up with an idea at 8 in the morning or 9 in the morning, that's just not happening. My brain just isn't wired that way. And other people are, you know, by 9 a.m., they've played 2 games of tennis, gone to the gym, taken a shower, walked the dog, you know, whatever, dropped the kids off at school. Right. So really, it depends on your schedule. Right. Dan Pink has a great book called When. He talks about, you know, there are larks or early birds and there are night owls. I'm an extreme night owl. Right. So my last full-time job before I went out on my own, my boss knew that. He didn't care when I got my work done. It was all about results. Get it done. I don't care when you do it. I don't care. If you want to do it at 2 in the morning, do it at 2 in the morning. If you want to come in at 10 a.m., you know, we're not punching a clock here. But I had other jobs where I was supposed to be at work at 8:30, and if I was there at 8:31, my boss would yell at me waste a half hour yelling at me for being 1 minute late, right? Where's the common sense there? In fact, one boss, I stayed until 1 in the morning in the office because she went off to play golf and have meetings or whatever, because she needed a report for the next day. So I stayed there till 1 a.m., finishing this report and PowerPoint slide. I left it on her desk. And I said, you know, I'm going to need an extra hour. I'll be in at 10 tomorrow instead of 9. Instead of appreciating the fact that I was there till 1 a.m. in the office. I mean, the cleaning people had come and gone, and I was still there working. Instead of thanking me for that and canceling plans and everything, she just yelled at me for not being on time the next day. Right? You just have to be on. There was no real reason I needed to be there. I was reachable. But again, what's the mentality there? We need to set people up for success. And it should be about productivity and results, not about, this isn't the Flintstones. Remember Fred Flintstone used to punch that stone, you know, punch clock as he was driving into the factories. We're not working, you know, on an assembly line. We need to, you know, allow people to do their work when and where works best for them, assuming it doesn't negatively impact other people, right? So I think that's the key thing. It depends on the type of role if you're the receptionist, you can't, and you need to greet people who come to the office, you can't show up 2 hours late, right? So again, it depends on the job and it depends on the culture.
Yeah, most right on. And you know, I've heard that thing about your boss chewing you out for the next day. It was like, that was ludicrous when I heard it the first time. It's still ludicrous. Like, what is your justification for the fabulous thing you created overnight? You know, there used to, at one of my 2 ships that I served on in the Navy, outside the personnel office door was a cartoon from the Navy Times. And it was an officer figure passing a piece of paper to a person sitting at a desk. And the clock on the wall says 5, right? And he says, there's no rush on this. Take all night if you want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I loved that thing. I absolutely loved it. It was so on point.
Yeah. Well, when I worked at Disney out in Burbank during the Michael Eisner, Jeffrey Katzenberg era, they expected people, the culture was to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So that's one of the sayings was, if you don't come into work on Saturday, don't even bother coming in on Sunday. You know, so it's meaning you're fired. So again, is that the healthiest culture and climate? I mean, it was an era of peak productivity, and it was such a great company to work for, and we were doing creative stuff. But you still need people to catch their breath and and unwind and not burn themselves out, especially in creative jobs. You can't dictate creativity. When an idea comes to you, you have to let people run with it. And right. So again.
Yeah, it's like me. I learned a long time ago, I can't just sit down at a typewriter and have it just flow.
Mm-hmm.
That's just impossible.
Yeah.
However, I'll get this inkling and I'll find a keyboard and I'll rock,
right,
and put out 3 times what I would have made myself create and not so good by sitting at a typewriter trying to do a fitness report or anything like that, because it had to be done that afternoon, even though it wasn't due for a month,
Yeah, we get our best ideas when we're walking the dog, when we're in the shower. In fact, I have, not to give them a plug, but there's a product called Aquanotes waterproof notepads, and I have it in my shower because that's where I get most of my ideas. So sometimes my wife is like, "Are you ever coming out of the shower?" I'm like, "I'm working in here." So you get a waterproof pencil and waterproof notepad, because that's where a lot of times, their slogan is "Don't let your best ideas go down the drain." So you never know. So if you're walking the dogs and you get an idea, dictate it into your phone, right? Use the voice recorder, because again, the worst place to come up with an idea is when you're staring at that blank screen or that blank piece of paper. So I always encourage people, keep a journal, jot down ideas as soon as they come to you, capture them. Like when I sat down to write my book, I had 15 years worth of content and stories and metaphors and models accumulated. I didn't sit down and say, okay, I need to write a book. What am I going to write? Right? It was really about taking 2,000 pages literally worth of accumulated content and saying, all right, how am I going to make this into a book? Right? So again, that's like you were saying, you need to, when the muse hits you. My boss at Disney always said that. He was a writer producer. And I said, when do you start? He said, when the muse strikes me. I'm like, well, that's hard to schedule around that because I never know when that's going to be. So I said, what time do I start? He said, just get here before I do. Now, that wasn't very helpful because some days he'd get there at 8 a.m. and other days at 1 p.m., right? So kind of a guessing game. But again, that was Hollywood.
Yeah. I love it. Well, my friend, I think we covered this topic in grand fashion. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope we did something good for you. Leave your comments. We'll be watching it for a while. And for those of you who are watching this, thank you for stopping in. Todd, always a great fun to be with you, man.
Always great, Terry. Thank you. Always great riffing with you and brainstorming and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for stopping in. Bye for now.